Good evening, my YouTube family. It's so great to see you all here. Gosh, Holly, I'm reading the chat. I'm sorry that happened to you. We had a change of dinner plans too, and but definitely nothing like yours. Oh gosh, that's terrible. But at least you're getting your money back. That's good news. That's that's a good thing to say about the grocery store where you bought it, that they will stand behind their products. So I'm happy to hear that. Stray Kitten, welcome. Rip Curl Readiness, welcome. Good to see you, my friend. Let me see who else. And so it looks like just the four of you so far right now. Says we got 6 watching, so there's somebody lurking in the shadows that hasn't told us they're here with us yet. Just 1 second. Congestion, like you would not believe. Okay. Hopefully that will end that for the next hour. Hello, Dave Simmons. Welcome. Good to see you. Diana, too. Welcome. Tonight's discussion, this chapter in this book, American Government, and so you've got Larry Sabato, one of my heroes. But anyhow, it's a very frustrating chapter. I have to say that because we're talking about the influence of polling and prediction type stuff and the effect that it has on the government. And then we see something happen like what has happened over the weekend in our government, where 70% of the people are very concerned about the southern border. And and the original thought process was that we aren't going to do these other 3 things unless you allow us to close the border, and we will do something about that. 70% of the people want that, and then that deal was abrogated, and there was nothing done to the border. And as a matter of fact, they even tripled the amount of money, almost triple the amount of money that was spent by the House authorized than what the Senate had requested. So, do we have any effect on them is the question. Hello, Triple G Farms. Good to see you. And Sumi is in here. All right. I had a great conversation with Sumi either last night or night before. Just, wow, what a pleasant person. Just thank you. It was just a great conversation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. The Unknown Knows by Volvod. Welcome. And Phioxerus, of course, welcome. You can lurk all you want to, sir, but we do value your input. So I do value when you put in comments. Butch Graves, good evening. Welcome. So, it's kind of frustrating because we really haven't had pollsters for that long in our history. I mean, and definitely not accurate polling, and not accurate concerns about, what do people think. And so, and there's good points and there's bad points to that, because number one, it's good that the politicians know what we want and what we think, but at the same time, how informed are those things that we're talking about? And we'll get into that later on. There was a survey taken in 2000, I believe, 2008. And the simple questions like, what's the name of the vice president? And it's astonishing the number of people who make decisions and vote, but don't know what it is that they're talking about. It's crazy. As a matter of fact, I was on New York Preppers live here over the weekend, and he puts out some great content. I strongly recommend. Sometimes I may not be 100% in sync with his methodology, although the rationale is good. But it's not him; it's the people in chat. My God, some of the things that people say in chat is just unbelievable. I am convinced. He showed a picture of a convoy of military vehicles in New Mexico. and it was on the convoy was actually a train convoy. So they had loaded up what appears to be about a battalion's worth of equipment and put it on a train. And then the train was going through New Mexico. And so all of a sudden people get upset, oh my God, the military's activating martial law and all this other kinds of stuff. And no, we're getting into the summer training cycle for the reserves and the National Guard. Interstate 40, that rail line is a natural, and the question I asked was, is it heading west towards the National Training Center in California, where everybody goes to do desert training and fight force-on-force opposition and practice warfare? It's a 2-week-long field training exercise. Or are they heading east? And people were saying, well, they aren't sending them to Israel because they're in woodland camouflage. And I said, wait a minute, guys. 7th Corps headquarters, 207th MI Brigade, which was the MI Brigade in support of 7th Corps headquarters, 307th MI Battalion, we had all woodland camouflage equipment when we deployed down to Desert Storm. So, you had woodland camouflage in the middle of the desert, let me tell you. So a lot of the things, you take what you got when you get it and how you get it, so just watching some of the comments just tells me people really don't know that much about our military, about how we deploy, about a lot of things. I'm surprised. Robin Sage kicked off in January. It was the 40th annual Robin Sage. Okay. So it's been going on every year for 40 years. It's the graduation exercise for special forces for the qualification course, what they call the Q course. And, but at least this year we didn't have all the banter about it's imminent martial law and they're invading us and they're putting special forces into our homes and all this other kinds of stuff. Hello, Midnight Blue 777. So one of the don't know what happened. I touched my mouse and all of a sudden everything just kind of died. But I'm back. But anyhow, so let me catch here. I unsubscribed because the mods seem to be power tripping. Yes, I got timed out, and I'm friends with Greg, so he and I have known each other for quite a while. But one of his mods timed me out because, oh gosh, about a month ago, he was saying that there was conclusive evidence that the Russians were shipping weapons to Texas so that Texas could start a civil war, secede and have a civil war. And I asked him for his source, and he says, well, I left it at work. I said, no, don't talk about it unless you have a source, because this is really off the wall stuff. And but anyhow, because I kept asking him he kept putting it out, and I kept asking for a source, so he put me in timeout, and basically, I wasn't allowed to talk on the channel for the rest of the evening because I challenged one of the mods and said, you're full of bull. That's just not right. But anyhow. Yep, that's for access. You're absolutely right. And so, and when I was at Fort Riley, we went down to Fort Sill one summer, and so we had, this was an ASA company, so this was an electronic warfare signals intelligence company, and as a matter of fact, we have more antennas in a SIGINT company than the Division Tactical Operations Center. So we were usually confused through aerial photography and through ELINT. That we had more of an electronic emission than did the Division Tactical Operations Center. So Fort Dix is practicing. Yeah, 60 seconds under a sprayer changes it into sand. Absolutely. Let me see here. Stray Kitten. So Stray Kitten, what's going on is there are some people, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of them, the biggest one, saying that Speaker Johnson out of Louisiana basically betrayed the Republicans, basically betrayed the GOP because he had promised that there would be a border wall contingency in the bill, and then he went without it. So she has asked for him to be removed. There's a vote of no confidence. what's going on is that he gave the Democrats everything they wanted in that bill. So it appears, if it comes to a vote on today, and I haven't seen the news today, if it's voted on today, it appears as if the Democrats will support him, and that little faction of Marjorie Taylor Greene and her small extreme rightists probably don't have the votes to unseat Speaker Johnson. So they're saying that looks like he's pro-Democrat. Interpret it how you want. I mean, he gave them what they wanted. He gave the Republicans nothing of what they wanted. So there is a and we don't know what happened behind the scenes. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, but anyhow, a lot of people are very upset about that. So. Midnight Blue. I retired out of Fort Huachuca down by Sierra Vista. So that was my last 4 years active duty. And then came home to Texas after I retired. So I don't know what part of Arizona you're in, but I do know that I love the Hummingbird Sanctuary on Fort Huachuca. It's the largest hummingbird sanctuary in the U.S. Well, here's Midnight Blue. Here's how it goes. I am not like all the other channels. Nobody has told me that all caps is good or bad. I prefer smaller case unless it's really important. Then it kind of stands out so I can see it. And I'm not one of those people that comes up with this thing about the false 3 emojis. I've never seen anything about that. I've never heard anything about that. So I'm not a big one on that either. So do what you got to do. Although I have fantastic moderators, and so if they want you to tone it down, then I always here's the philosophy. So this is our channel, okay? I kind of have the guidelines that everybody has to be kind, polite, and respectful. So that's the minimum, and then after that, because this is when I opened up this evening, I said, hello, YouTube family. And this really is. We've got some people who have been here for quite a while. Not very many of us, but we're very close. We have good discussions. We're respectful. We don't always agree, but we do have good discussions. And we state our points of view. And so as long as all those things are met, then good to go. Now that we did have one person, it was 2 weeks ago, last week, something like that, who wanted to push the envelope, and so the mods had full authority to say, hey guy, you're not right for this channel. If you want to complain that much, maybe you need to go somewhere else. And so they kind of encouraged him to do that. Devil Dog Prepper, I wholeheartedly agree. And I wish we could have clean bills, and this one was not. It was a 3-in-1 wrap up, and $95 billion. Anyhow. Okay. So Rip Curl Ratings. I am a mod at Greg's channel and many other great channels, and I hate when I see mods that go too far. I really don't do anything to anyone unless they spam or are disrespectful more than once. Yep, I agree. And you're a great mod here too. Thank you. So, but I encourage you to see. Now, one of the other channels that I listen to, and he's had a couple of his channels shut off from YouTube. He has good content, but he just disrespects people and very foul language. And I don't care for that. A little bit on the arrogant side, but there are two that I like to listen to. I like to listen to Greg on New York Prepper, and I like to listen to Texas News Studio, TNS, with Mark. Oh, what's Mark's last name? I forget Mark's last name, but I really like those two. I really like Canadian Prepper too. I know a lot of people say that he is a fearmonger. Canadian Prepper puts it the way it is, and he and City Prepping both. They're very knowledgeable, put out very good content. They're very well researched content. Greg puts out very well researched content. I got 21 years as an intelligence analyst, so sometimes I don't disagree. I don't agree with his conclusion, but you have to give him credit. He uses a very rational approach at what he is trying to determine, and you have to respect him for that. And so I do. And I will never call him out in public. I may send him an email and let him know in private, but I'll never in public say anything bad about Greg in New York Prepper. So let's talk about this. Public opinion and political socialization. Let me get my eyes. I clean these. So actually, public opinion research didn't really get going until it's a kind of a recent phenomenon, maybe really in earnest in the 20th century. But we can do some interesting things. For example, it says public opinion on global warming. So it asks two different questions. Number one, is global warming a major problem? And we have, Brazil, 90% yes, South Korea, 68% yes, Nigeria, 57% yes, Pakistan, 50% yes, Canada, 47% yes, and China, 30% yes. China is the biggest polluter there is, and yet they say that global pollution is not a problem. Okay, now then they say, should we have environmental protection? Should that be a priority? So Brazil, 79% say yes, so it pretty much goes down. What's surprising is that Canada says 66% yes, they should prioritize it, way over what they say is a problem. And then China, 76% of the people want environmental protection, even though only 30% of them say it's a problem. So it all depends on how you ask the question. Canadian Prepper and City Prepping push AGW. I don't know what AGW is. Anthropogenic global warming. I don't even know what that is. So you have to educate us. Maybe I'll turn people off. Maybe I won't. Here's Lee's opinion. Okay. And we saw it. Dutch Sense was talking about this morning on the earthquake swarms. We had 55 5.0 or higher earthquakes in the Pacific Rim over the course of the last 48 hours. And right now we have some major sunspots that are pointing towards the Earth. So if you watch Suspicious Observer, who is an astronomer, he talks about the sunspots and the effects that it has on the Earth's magnetic field. Then you have Dutch Sense, who is basically a volcanologist, and so he's talking about earthquakes and the effects of the sun and the solar spots on the magnetic fields of the Earth and pulling it and causing earthquakes. And so we do have a Earth-facing spot that is causing, according to the two of them, these geomagnetic forces to cause earthquakes to appear. And then we have antipodes as well. So whatever happens on one side of the Earth, the opposite side is going to suffer some stuff going on as well. So number one, there's a lot more to quote climate change than what we are led to believe. Okay, there are natural causes that there are out there. So that's number one. Number two, we know that we have had 2, possibly 3 ice ages over the history of the United States, history of the world. So you've got this warming, cooling, warming, cooling, warming. Where are we in that cycle? Okay, are we in the warming and about to warm out to the max, or are we in the cooling and about ready to go back down to the cooling? We really don't know where we are in those cycles. So we don't know where the change is going. Okay. You also have the effects of the polar shift. So there's a lot of things that are going on. Now, in order for me to say, now, gosh, this is difficult. Is man causing a deviation to the normal cycle? Possibly. Highly probable that with internal combustion engines and everything else, we're having an effect. The problem is what I don't know, and I'm not smart enough to know, and I wish somebody could tell me, and everybody I asked doesn't know either, is how much of a deviation from the natural cycle is man having an effect upon? Now, there are some things that are very obvious. The pollution in the waters of the ocean, the plastics, the islands of plastics and trash and everything else in the ocean, that's got to stop. That's all there is to it. All the runoff contaminants through the fields of pesticides and herbicides and everything else that's being put into the lakes and rivers, and then through the water supply into the oceans, and then you can't get it out of the oceans. That's got to stop. So I think there are some things, we're poisoning some things. What's the overall effect of that? How much of a degree of change are we having? I don't know. Is it something worth being concerned about, or is it something we just need to watch? I'm not smart enough to know those answers. So I'm kind of a, what would you call me? A cautious observer, a curious, cautious observer, one who has more questions than there are answers. But I'm also not an alarmist. I wish we could do more, but I don't think we're at the point of extinction this year. Okay, how's that? Anyhow, crazy way for saying I would like to have more information. I'm not 100% convinced that it's an emergency. I'm convinced that there is something to be concerned about, but I'm not convinced it's an emergency. Oh, wow, Stray Kitten. Yes, I would say so. That is a 20-year-old person, and even Greg sometimes has to calm him down. He gets a little bit excited. He got a little bit excited over the course of this last late Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Greg had to calm him down a couple times. And so, yeah, give Greg another chance. And I would say go back and just watch him. He has good content. Hello, Pete. Welcome. Okay, so that's where we are. Let's take a look at the development of public opinion polling in 1883 Boston Globe poll. In an early attempt at public opinion research, the Globe sent reporters to selected precincts to collect data and tried to predict election results as a result of it. In 1922, public opinion written, Walter Lippmann wrote a book, and this was basically a doctoral thesis, emphasizing the need for additional research on public opinion. What did people think? Now, one of the key things about Walter Lippmann's book was he was also one of the first people to realize how you ask a question can have a lot of emphasis on how it is responded to, okay? And I'll give you an example of that here in a little bit. Then we found out that straw poll errors, faulty polling methods caused Literary Digest to make an inaccurate prediction that Republican Alfred M. Landon would beat incumbent Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1936. Then, of course, we had the Dewey defeats Truman prediction in 1948. Miscalculations cost the Gallup organization incorrectly to predict that Republican challenger Thomas E. Dewey would beat incumbent President Harry S. Truman. Then in 1952, the NES, National Election Studies, researchers at the University of Michigan began conducting quadrennial surveys to measure political attitudes and behaviors of the American electorate. 1992, tracking polls were introduced. 1999, internet polls were introduced. And then in 2008, they started doing entrance polls. Hello, Devil Dog Prepper. Welcome. Oops, I saw something from Sue I want to see here. I perfectly believe that as well. And for example, one of the things that we studied my freshman year in college back in 1970, so Dr. Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb, and he was one of my poli-sci professor in 1970. And we had to read that, of course. You had to read his book that we were overpopulating the earth and we were at a point of no return. And then we had a Sarco, which was the tallest freestanding smokestack in the United States. And it was a copper smelter. It was on the west side of Mount Franklin. And of course, University of Texas at El Paso kind of straddles that. So we got a lot of the stuff from Sarco on campus. So we were very concerned about that. But one of the things we started taking a look at was, in order to get milk out of cows, they were injecting them with hormones, and the hormones were basically causing them to mature at a faster rate. And so after we had done that for a couple of years, I think it was in the 1980s, they finally came out with a seminal study that said that puberty was happening in our children here in the United States on average 4 years earlier than it had been 20, 25 years before. And it was attributed to those growth hormones that had been put into the dairy cattle in order to get them to produce milk. So those growth hormones were then passed through from the cow into the milk, and from the milk into our children. And so, we've become more aware of, we have to be careful how we manipulate our society, our environment around us, because we can have unpredicted and unsolicited effects that we may not readily think are that good. Okay, so types of polls. You have traditional telephone polls. I don't know how they can tell whether you're serious or not when you answer questions on a telephone poll. But I'll tell you what, when I get a telephone poll, they are sorry. I tell them exactly what I think. Exit polls, I have never told anybody anything at an exit poll. What I do inside, Helen and I aren't even 100% sure of what each other votes for when we step inside the polling booth. We kind of know our general ideas, but we don't know 100% for sure who the other person is or is not voting for. Tracking polls, starting with 1992, just, what is the general trend? Then internet polls by Zogby, that started that in 1992. So they're taking a fraction of a fraction. So they're taking a T1 statistically, about 3,000 correspondents. And so they asked those 3,000 people throughout the United States on the internet what their opinions are. And then they take that and they attribute that microcosm of the U.S. to the macrocosm of the United States. Then there are push polls. So that's kind of pushing. What they're doing is they're asking questions. And then if you align with those answers, then they're telling you what those questions represent as far as which candidate you should support. So, so the first thing you have to ask when you conduct a poll is, who do you ask? Okay. How do you get a random sample, and how do you get a purely random sample? I mean, I could say I could go down here to the county courthouse and look at a random sample, but that random sample at the county courthouse is different than the random sample that's going to be outside of, say, Baylor Scott and White Hospital. Typically you're going to have different political feelings in one of the most conservative counties in Texas at the county courthouse than you will at a healthcare facility. Those are not going to be the same. So even though you're going to sample a population within those, by mere fact of where you are sampling, you are not getting the full microcosm of the society. You're getting a very small portion, and that portion may have distortions as far as representation. You can also do the same thing with ethnic background, with age background, with gender background, all kinds of different things that come into play as far as what is that person's opinion and what's causing that opinion. So a lot of good questions around that about can you really have a purely random sample that is indicative of society as a larger force, I guess let's call it. So, and here's one of those. Here's a question asked two different ways, and I'll give you the responses from two different people. So, question number one: do you favor or oppose homosexuals serving in the military? Strongly favor 34%, somewhat favor 25%, somewhat oppose 10%, some strongly oppose 19%. A little while later, that same group was asked the following question: do you favor or oppose gay men and lesbians serving in the military? So basically, it's the same question, just a change in terminology, okay? So it goes from 34% strongly favor to 51% strongly favor, from 25% somewhat to 19%, from 10% somewhat opposed to 7% somewhat opposed, and from 19% strongly opposed to 12% strongly opposed. So you have a more favorable acceptance based upon the terminology and the way that the question is asked. Okay, so I mean that is now a big thing. Is for pollsters, is how do you phrase the question to try to get the greatest neutral answer, or have the greatest neutral question, so that you don't have any bias built into the question itself at the time that you ask it. So we've got number one, who do you ask? Number two, how do you ask it? And then number three, how do you analyze the data? So there is, in everything, there's a margin of error. And that margin of error is going to include people like me who are going to tell you exactly what they think, whether you want to hear it or not, or may hedge. I will tell you, there are people out there who probably won't even answer the questions. So there could be a margin of error, and usually it's going to be plus or minus 3 to 5% statistical error. And then you're also going to have what's called the sampling error. So the sampling error depends on the quality of the sample that was drawn. How close to a random sample is that, or is that sample skewed in one direction or the other? The skewing of that sample also affects the overall margin of error, okay? So let me just ask you a question before we move on any further. Do you pay attention to the polls? And if you do pay attention to the polls, do they influence your decision-making in any way? And if so, how? So let's take a look at it now. Do you pay attention to the polls? Do they matter to you? Thank you, Sumi. So, do you have any faith in polls? Four out of 10. Polls don't matter to Triple G. Midnight Blue doesn't pay attention to the polls. Who's up? Who's down? I do only for out of fear. Butch Graves, no. Midnight Blue, no. Cats and Prepping, no faith in polls. Diana too, yes. And I'm going to say I'm kind of on the fence. Yes and no. And the reason I do yes and no is because I say yes, I pay attention because it tells me where a lot of people are, but no, because I have found out that most people don't know what they're talking about, and so their opinion really doesn't matter to me. So that's kind of a yes and no, okay? Rip Curl Readiness. I always research how they were done and sample size, etc. I also do my own research. Great going. Holly Ivans. I pay attention to polls, but I don't trust them. That's great. Fioxer says before 2000 he trusted them. Polls don't pay attention. Whatever will be, will be. That there's a lot of truth to that. So let's go back to what Fioxer says. And so they have. Let me get to this graph here in the book. I know it's in here somewhere. There was a discussion. Here it is. No, that's not the one I was looking for. No. Oh, here it is. It was before. So if we take a look at basically, so this was basically polls from FDR at the far left. And one line is what they expected, what the pollsters predicted, and the other line is actual vote. So you'll see that it was very inaccurate during FDR. Then where we have the next great divergence is during Nixon and Clinton. Okay, and as we get closer into the 2000s, you'll notice that they're converging, and that there was a lot more similarity. Now, Once we get past that and we get into after Obama, then the divergence is really gigantic again. And I think that's because we have such a liberal news media that they want to slant it one direction. I think what's happening is they are thinking that they can influence how we vote by telling us that we are alone and a social outcast because everybody else is voting a different way. So if they predict one way, then they can influence us to vote along with the rest of the sheep instead of voting the way we want to. That's just my personal theory. So I don't have anything to show any proof to that or anything else. In the 30s, the polls were primarily exit polls, cats and prepping. And yeah, they didn't even have telephone polls back then. And that's POLLS, not POLES. Okay. So they talk about public opinion in the Iraq War. And they asked the question, was the Iraq War a mistake? When it first happened in 2000, in the early 2000s, 80% of the people said no, 20% said yes. Now it's kind of flipped to where and it's actually converging again back towards 50-50, where it appears as if right now 50% say yes and 50% say no. So, I mean, over time, as more revelations appear on what we know about back then, et cetera, then things happen. Also, once again, this is how media controls the news as to whether or not you get accurate information to make those decisions. Give you a good example. 3rd of the 63rd Armored, 1st Infantry Division, 7th Corps. And I believe it was 1st of the 18th Infantry. But anyhow, one of those, I think it was 3rd of 63rd Armored, came across a cache of 152 millimeter GB and VX shells in the desert. Now, GB is a blood agent and VX is a nerve agent. So they had these 152 millimeter artillery shells carrying chemical warheads. Okay. Now, by all definitions, a chemical warhead is a weapon of mass destruction, a WMD. And then, of course, those were reported. So 3rd and 63rd Armored was part of 1st Infantry Division. 1st Infantry Division is part of 7th Corps. I was in 7th Corps, 207th MI Brigade, which is the military intelligence brigade supporting the Corps headquarters. And so we saw the reports and everything else. We reported that. It got up to Nancy Pelosi, and she said they don't count because those aren't the WMD that you were looking for. So she told us what we were looking for and refused to accept what we found because, in her opinion, we were looking for nukes instead of looking for chemical agents. But yet what President Bush had said the whole time was that they had used chemical agents in the past in the Iraq-Iran war and had used chemical agents in the past against their own people, right? So what do? Nancy Pelosi says that those aren't the agents you're looking for. So the news picked up on that, and they said that there were never any WMD found as a result of Desert Storm. So and the whole reason we went in for Desert Storm was because President Bush said they were WMD. So by Nancy Pelosi redefining WMD, now we have a misperception, right? Okay. I do too, especially on the side of the road if I am seeing double and at night and driving fast. So the proof was 3rd of the 63rd Armored found them. We captured them. We later destroyed them. But depends on how you define WMD. Okay. We found GB and VX. And if you don't accept that, then that's fine. That's what happens is when people get to control the definition of words. You remember what Bill Clinton said. It all depends on what the definition of is. Okay. So if you refuse to accept chemical munitions that were used against the Iranians, if you refuse to accept chemical munitions that were used against his own people, that is the reason why we went to war, which is what was stated by President Bush. If you refuse to accept that we found them, nothing can be done. Okay. I think it was St. Augustine says that to those who believe no proof is necessary, and to those who don't believe no proof is sufficient. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised. Okay. So lack of information. So they did a survey, okay? And so do men and women think differently about political issues? And pretty much on some issues, absolutely. On other issues, not necessarily. So so here's the question. Favor a woman's ability to obtain an abortion as a matter of choice. Men's 30, and now these numbers are from 2000. Okay, I'm sorry, 2008. Okay, so this is 2008. So bear that in mind as we're studying this. So at that point, in 2008, 36% of the men said they were in favor. Only 43% of women were in favor. So there's about a 7 percentage point variance between the two. Approve of the way the U.S. government is handling the war in Iraq. 26% of men, 17% of women. Agree that controlling and reducing illegal immigration is an important policy goal. 93% for men, 91% for women. Very close determination there. Favor allowing people to put a portion of Social Security payroll into personal retirement accounts that they would invest on their own. 36% of men, 29% of women. Fairly close. Agree that newer lifestyles are breaking down society. Very close. 62% of men said yes, 64% of women said yes, and voted for Barack Obama in 2008. 49% of men said yes, and 56% of women said yes. So, I mean, we can see that there are some differences in how gender looks at different issues, okay? We can also say that age is a factor in how people look at different issues. We can look at education as being a factor. We can look at where you live. Is it in an urban, suburban, or a rural economy as to what type of an influence you have on your decision making, whether or not you're a regular churchgoer. I found an interesting statistic Sunday that I thought was really interesting. They asked this group of people, and I think that the survey size was something like 3,000. Okay, they asked these 3,000 people, "Do you attend church regularly on Sunday?" And they said yes. And 40% of them said yes. Okay, so then they took their cell phone numbers and did GPS locating on those cell phone numbers, and the following 4 Sundays. And of the 40% who said yes, really only 1/10 of that 40%, 4% total, were actually in or near a church on a Sunday morning. Most of the other phones were at other locations. Most common one was a golf course. So that's one of those things where they tried to verify the responses to a survey and found out that they weren't being accurate in their responses. Let me see. Okay, family, peers, and school. Should civics be taught in American high schools? Absolutely. Just people don't understand. I mean, we saw that here the last 2 weeks. We saw that one person who said that we were violating his First Amendment rights by telling him to be kind, polite, and respectful. And so that tells me that people don't understand what the First Amendment says or anything else. Cats and prepping, good thing. I don't know how many other churches do that. In my church, we have a historical relationship with the Jewish religion. And so remember, Jesus was a Jew. And so we have a lot of the old Jewish religious customs that we practice in our church. And one of those customs is that if you go to church after sundown on Saturday night, that counts for a Sunday attendance. So yes, cats and prepping, you're absolutely correct. That is an option. And every once in a while I exercise that option. But so there I don't know if other churches do that, but I do know our church does that on a regular basis. Okay, let me see. So the effects of public opinion on politics. I'm of the mind, and this is anecdotal. This is personal. This is I don't have any hard, concrete evidence. I look at the people around me. I see what's going on. I ask questions, and I will say that I believe that the vast majority of the American people feel that their political representatives are not representing them in the way that they want to be represented. That they feel that once they vote for them, that they've been elected, they've got 2 or 6 years, depending upon House or Senate, 4 years for president. You voted for me, you gave me the trust that I would make the right decisions. So even though it's not what I told you I was going to do, I'm going to make my best decisions based on my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion. So the only time that our opinion counts is when they're asking for our vote, when they want to hear what we want to hear, so that they can tell it to us in order to get our vote. And then once we cast our vote, then what we want goes down the tubes. I think you're going to see a major shift in minority voting this cycle. I believe that there are enough members of the minority who have been taken advantage of, who have been considered as a sure vote for since LBJ. The Great Revolution under LBJ back in the late 60s or mid 60s, up until Nixon. He was trying to buy votes. He bought votes, and then forgot to be thankful for those votes that he bought. And I think that there's going to be a shift back towards where those votes were up until LBJ. And so, so those are just my opinions. Looking to see if y'all have any support or opposite to that. But I think we're going to, if this election happens, and I'm still speculative as to whether or not this election is going to happen. I think that there's enough stuff going on. So if I were to give you a caution and an admonition about things happening in our country, I will tell you, my biggest concern, my absolute biggest concern is our grid. And I have always, hello Shenanigans, welcome, good to see you. I have always been concerned, I've always been opposed to Red Dawn. I said Red Dawn cannot exist. Number one, I was a Soviet analyst, a Russian analyst. So they don't have enough landing craft, they don't have enough aircraft to get more than 1 or 2 divisions across the ocean to land on our shores. And that's assuming that they made it through our Navy and through our Air Forces, who would definitely take a toll on them. So, I don't think that we could ever have those forces come in and take over. Now, China recently has gotten some ports in Mexico and Costa Rica, Venezuela, Nicaragua. So we're seeing that those ports are moving a lot closer to us so that they could move using regular transport ships, their forces to Central America and then come up through the Central American area. So that is now a threat that I had not foreseen in the past. Okay. Then we have the 80,000 Chinese who have crossed the border in the last 3 years. Single, unaccompanied, military-aged men, well-dressed, good physical fitness, good physical shape, being bused and dropped off by bus at the entry points. Then we have the general up in Idaho who says he's seeing them being trained with weapons in Idaho. then just last week, DHS intercepted a container, one of those shipping containers, full of military-grade weaponry and ammunition. And so I am afraid that we have at least 4 divisions of infantry sitting here inside the United States ready to make an attack. And how well armed they are, I don't know. Can they take out our grid and our infrastructure? Absolutely. So the 2 things that concern me the most, as far as the threats internal, taking the electrical grid out of power, or poisoning the water system. So either one of those 2 have me greatly concerned, and so that's where I am. Will that happen before the election and influence the election, or will we have to postpone the election or cancel the election because of subversive groups inside the United States coming up and causing problems? I don't know. But all I can say is let's prepare for it. Let's be ready for it, and make sure you know why you're voting. So I wanted to give you that there was one other statistic in here that I thought was really amazing. If I can find it, let me see. I should have tabbed that page, but it's really interesting. Oh, I have great news. I did get an email today from Mr. John Grammer, and he has confirmed that he will be with us this Thursday evening to discuss his book with us on the Thursday night book club. So I'm really looking forward to that great book. I mean, this book is exactly what I just said my biggest fear is, okay? And that's the whole premise of this book, is that we've been infiltrated and there are subversives operating inside our country. So, I mean, he is hitting my fears right where they are. A great book. If you haven't read it, please read it. Please get it. Link is in the description, and just a phenomenal book. I'm still not finding this, but it was asking a group of young voters different questions, and the number of young voters who did not know the answers. So it was just unbelievable. Lack of information. It should be right in here. See, and that's another one. They talk about religion in here, and that's another one that oh, here we go. I found it. But religion is another one that we forget that we do have a moral code, and here in the United States, most of that moral code is founded based upon religion, and so enforcing that moral code, it can dictate how you vote. Okay, and so that's another one of those big influencers is that. But remember, LBJ outlawed the ability of your pastor to talk about morality and selection or deselection of a candidate for a political office with his act. When was that? 1936, I think it was. I forget when it was. The Johnson Act. But they refused to endorse him for representative. So he said, well, if I get elected, I'll pass a bill that you can't talk about politics in church. And if you do talk about politics in church, I'll take away your tax-free status. So that's how that has happened over the course of the last, since 1936, almost 100 years now. Here we go. What is the extent of Americans' political knowledge? So this is the percent of people who are unable to identify the answer to these questions. Who is the vice president? 43% did not know. Who is your governor? 33% did not know. Who is the Speaker of the House? 65% did not know. Who is the current Prime Minister of Great Britain? 76% did not know. Who is the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court? 68% did not know. So, I mean, you start asking questions like that and you say, and these are the people who are making decisions that are affecting us, and they don't know, basically what's going on in order to make those decisions. So it's kind of disheartening, okay? But that's the way it is. So any questions or comments before we wrap this up? We're pretty much on time. Butch says, Oh, something, sending prayers to Butch. I need to be aware of this. So let me see if I can't find it. Oh, no, Butch, I'm sorry. Our prayers go for you. Oh, wow. And I don't know whether that's your wife's sister or one of your siblings, one of your brother's wives, but either way, that's tough. And so we wish you the best. Okay. Yes, it is too expensive, cats and prepping. So did I'm going back. Did we lose Rip Curl? Rip Curl, are you still here? Okay. So tomorrow night, we've got week 11 of food storage for preppers. I am working on a radio video right now, and that's going to be, gosh, when you take a look at the frequency spectrum and where we are, and I know people have lots of questions, why can't CB talk to FRS, talk to GMRS, talk to ham, talk to, and all these great questions. I think I found a good chart that's going to kind of explain that. Oh, okay. I was just, I hadn't seen you for a while. I hope we hadn't lost you. So what frequencies do you listen to? And then what mode of transmission do you listen to? For example, when you listen to an AM radio station, okay, AM radio stations are amplitude modulated and they're in the HF spectrum, so 3 to 30 megahertz, and actually they're in the medium frequency because you get 1.9 megahertz would be 1910, for example, 1910 kilohertz would be a good AM radio station. Advantages: long range, amplitude modulation, which is very susceptible to static and weather conditions, single sideband, but that's also the band where you're going to find citizens band radio. Now, when you start talking about FRS and GMRS, you're talking about up in the high VHF, low UHF. When you start talking about ham, I'm going to divide ham into two different parts: technician grade, which is basically the Baofeng and the Yaesu YA6, those types of things, which are high VHF, UHF, VHF, UHF, and then you've got the typical shortwave, which is the HF that ham was up until the duplex systems with the repeaters came in. So it's going to be a very good conversation, but you're going to get a little bit of radio theory. Don't be too ashamed of that. I hope I get it right. Okay, so with that, remember that we're all in this together so we can come out the other side together. Please be kind, polite, and respectful to you. And we will close with number 6, verses 24, 25, 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. So people, do me a favor. I gave you a couple channels that I really like and I really trust. Check out New York Prepper. Check out Alaska Prepper. Check out Goshen Prepping is a fantastic channel. I like him. Prepper Dog is a good channel. City Prepping is a good channel. Canadian Prepper is a good channel. My friend Steve, we've had him here on this show. Steve Smith and Integrative Preparedness. He has a really good channel. So I strongly recommend that you subscribe to all of those channels and, just pay attention and always ask yourself a question. Does that seem logical? Okay. And I'm also going to I was a targeting analyst for 7th Corps. So I would take intelligence and say, what do we want to hit with what asset? Artillery, aircraft, whatever, short range ballistic missiles or anything like that. So I'm going to give you my analysis of why I think a lot of you who are worried about whether if you're next to a training center, you're next to Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, am I going to be a nuke target? No, no, they're not going to waste a nuke on a training center, because by the time they get those guys trained, the war will be over. Okay, they're going to be more concerned about other things. Am I going to be a target if I'm next to Fort Hood? No, Fort Hood is not a threat. They have to move that armored division by either aircraft or by boat to get to you over to Ukraine or anywhere else before they can be a threat. They're not a threat to you sitting where they are. So why waste anything on them? So those are the kinds of questions I want you to ask yourself. Does this really make sense? Would they really waste a nuke on that target? Is it a threat to them, an immediate threat? So we'll do a video on that in here coming too. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening. Thank you for being here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye.